It's a very exciting day for me today because it's one more new industry that I've not spoken to in the last few episodes from the media industry. So I have with me Akshansh. Akshansh leads the online product play for the Zee Media group.
So I did not choose the thug life. The thug life chose me. The traffic that any media organization per se or the organizations that I have worked in the past is getting definitely been tens and millions. So the scale that you manage is totally on a different level.
Of all the people that are coming on the mobile web side of things, is there a team that wants to move them towards app users? Hi, and welcome to yet another episode of the State of Retention Marketing podcast. It's a very exciting day for me today because it's one more new industry that I've not spoken to in the last few episodes from the media industry. So I have with me Akshansh. Akshansh leads the online product play for the Zee Media group.
Yes.
And a bunch of products within that portfolio. And I'll let him introduce himself further from here.
So I head products and engineering for IDPL, which is a subsidiary of Zee Media Corporation Limited. So everything and anything that falls under the Zee brand, be it Zee News, Zee Business, beyond our flagship brand DNA, infotainment brands like Bollywood Life, India.com, their websites and apps is something that I manage.
Awesome. So, do tell us a little bit about your journey till this point, Akshansh.
I actually started my journey with a computer science engineering degree, and like any engineer, I thought that first I'll do engineering and then I'll do MBA and then I'll decide what I want to be in life. So with that, probably just straight out of college, as luck would have it, I landed up with one of the media organizations, which is ABP News. They asked me to launch a couple of their properties, which eventually did very well. And then from then on, have worked on a variety of roles, given that I have an MBA from MICA as well, which is considered to be Mecca of marketing. And then recognizing the trends, I did a graduation program from Harvard as well in artificial intelligence. So all these have culminated into a career which spans across products, marketing, technology, user acquisition, and retention while managing the entire P&Ls as well. So
that's quite a broad spectrum of things, clearly. While I've completely loved the fact that a guy who understands technology as naturally is able to talk about marketing and retention in the same way, because it's a fairly unusual kind of combination. So how much of this was conscious choices being made that you want to add, and you chose this AI course? How did that come about?
So I did not choose the thug life. The thug life chose me. So that it's the same analogy. I did not choose media, but the media chose me. And once you land up in media, you are not really sure on what exactly. It's an industry wherein you are expected to do anything and everything. It falls under the umbrella. So one day you're thinking about how do you manage your product, how do you increase your user acquisition and strategy. Next day you're sitting with your editorial, drafting the video strategy. Next day you're sitting with your marketing teams and you're defining that how do you promote those videos. And then you are sitting with your engineering teams and figuring out how to load those videos faster. So anything that falls in the digital space, once you land up in media, you start working in cross-functional teams, and there is no clear bifurcation as such. That is what separates our industry from the rest.
So help us understand a little bit about the properties that you're running and what kind of, let's say, scale this could be at an order of magnitude level. And how does the organization that looks after these properties look like? And focusing on the whole user engagement, retention, acquisition pieces.
So any media organizations, the numbers are huge comparison to when you deal with FMCG or an e-commerce brand, wherein the number of visitors that you will get in a day will probably be in thousands. The traffic that any media organization per se or the organizations that I have worked in the past is getting definitely been tens and millions. So the scale that you manage is totally on a different level.
Sure.
For one. And media organizations, per se, as I was saying, that everybody needs to don different hats and work with cross-functional teams. But basically, there are two main parts to it. One is editorial and the other is user acquisition. Rest, all the sub-functions support these two verticals. So when it comes to user acquisition, probably they work on the inputs of editorial. And editorial works on the inputs of user acquisition. User acquisition tells them that what the user is coming and exactly consuming. Basis that you draft your editorial strategy. And editor actually tells you that this is what we see is can work. Can you work a strategy around this? So it's a symbiotic relationship.
Sure. So when you talk about user acquisition, this is essentially where we're talking about driving traffic and app installs. Would there be like a fair split between mobile web traffic and app installs as goals, or how does the interplay work?
So see, 90% of our traffic come from mobile devices. And if I talk about any media, big media publishing house, the split between app and mobile traffic would be 60 to 40%, 60 being in the favor of mobile traffic.
Mobile web traffic, you mean?
Mobile web traffic.
Okay.
M traffic.
And in terms of the effort to drive installs, is that like a conscious effort being made at all times? Do you see a difference in engagement behavior of users?
So branding plays a very big part. So most of the acquisition funnel is all organic. When people want to consume news, there are different political ideologies that people are aligned with. So if you're a pro supporter, a pro government supporter, or if you're a leftist, your choices will depend on those. But then obviously every media house turns out a lot of content on the lines of entertainment, on the lines of crime, on the lines of sports, which act as the crowd puller, and then it's up to you to retain them through efficient use of notifications, through use of a good UI UX, which is aesthetically appealing, a good navigation, so on and so forth.
Sure. So of all the people that are coming on the mobile web side of things, is there a team that wants to move them towards app users? Is there a conscious play there?
So see, distribution is something that we don't talk about much. It's just that our content should reach out to the masses. It can be any medium. So you being a marketer, you must have come across the code wherein it says the medium is the message.
Sure. So we typically look at the retention behavior of users a little differently, and your ability to engage with the user on an app tends to be slightly richer. So most conversations that typically tend to have a strong inclination towards driving more app installs because you see better behavior. And which is what I was trying to allude to, that if it's a metric that you care about, but if you say it's sort of lower relevance in your scheme of things, then maybe that's working for your purpose.
Just adding to that, probably the users on our app are people who are our loyalists. So they are the ones who want to consume news only on our platforms.
Sure.
And the traffic that comes on mobile web are the ones wherein intent-based queries are running. So suppose there is a breaking news, be that some gangster is shot or a cyclone is coming, you probably go on to Google and then you type in what is the update on this particular issue, and whoever ranks first is probably going to get that share of voice. But when it comes to mobile app, it's all your loyalist audience that every day you have to put in an effort to retain them. So loyalist and probably intent-based crowd. So obviously, if we have more and more people on app, that certainly helps. It helps in our traffic numbers. It ultimately translates into more revenue rather than on the mobile web.
Yeah, I was going to get to the whole KPI and business side of things in a bit, but before that, just zooming on the triggered engagements versus organic engagements. I would imagine you'll split your incoming traffic. You said the intent base, which is essentially somebody put something on search. They ended up landing on your content because that ranked at an appropriate place in the search results. And then you had something going on with respect to directly somebody coming in, typing your brand name in the browser and then coming there. And on the other side, you have organic app opens where somebody just in the morning as a routine opens the app to go through the top news of the day. Or it could be triggered by a push notification, which is where you announce some breaking news. What does that metric look like?
There is certain strategy goes into converting your MWeb users into app users.
Sure.
So obviously, first part is the paid part, when you run marketing campaigns on certain editorial pieces or editorial content that you have been churning out and you want to showcase it to the world. Or probably every publishing house has a typical ideology and you would want to create your user base there. So that is where the paid part comes in. But on organic part, the intent always is to, whenever there is a breaking news story, capitalize on that news story, and then when people come onto your site, you try and convert them into app users. The benefit there is, as I keep on telling people, that with any industry, the sampling is something which happens once in 30 days or once in 15 days. So if you're going to buy a soap or a toothpaste, you'll probably arrive at a decision making every 15 days when your toothpaste is up or your soap is up. Similarly, for e-commerce brand, you would only shop for clothes, even if you are from tier 1 city and SECA audience. Since you are a marketer, you'll be able to relate to that. You'll probably buy once a week. Most of the people buy once a month. But in media, you at least get 10 chances every day to convert a user, because there are at least 10 breaking stories which people search. And then similarly on app, to retain people, you at least send out 10 to 15 notifications. So every notification is a sort of a chance to retain the user. At the same time, convert the existing loyalist user into an evangelist for your brand as well. If there is a breaking and you are able to break the story first, your notification goes out first, a user reads it. 9 out of 10 times he's going to refer that story to somebody, and he's going to say that I read it on Zee News or per se any other DNA or Beyond, and then that is how app installs are driven.
So get to the user first is like a big part of your KPI in some sense. And you mentioned this aspect around loyalists turning into evangelists. What would be the metric of assessing the user segmentation in this scenario? Because it's a complex kind of an audience profile. You have a diversity of interests, perhaps, diversity of frequency of engagement, diversity of intervals of engagement. How do you look at the audience segmentation?
So probably first set of segmentation is always based on interest-based cohorts, what sort of content you are consuming. Second would be your geography, because it matters a lot wherein you are sitting and consuming news. Something happening in northern part of the country might not be relevant to you. At the same time, something happening in eastern part might not be relevant to you. So geography-based classification is is another thing that we take care of. Third thing is gender-based, because there is a stark difference between the news consumption and type of news consumption between men and women.
Okay.
So these are typically the three type of cohortization or segmentation that we do when we cater to.
If I were to just break this down to say that, okay, you had the interest base, and this would be subject to, let's say, click streams, or what kind of content have you been clicking or spending time on. And then you talked about geography, which is in India is multiple geographies. So the interest could be 10 odd maybe segments, something like that.
Not even 10, 5 to 6.
5 to 6. Maybe. And geography will end up being what? North, south, east, west. So there's more granularity.
We actually do segmentation basis tier 1 cities, tier 2 cities, and even tier 3 cities. So
there's a tier as well. There's one more attribute. You'd be the product and tech guy as well. So you understand the number of columns you're adding to the whole table, right? And which is where now I start to wonder that, okay, there is variable 1, 5. Now variable 2, which has the tier 1 to tier 3, tier 4. Then you have a variable around what? North, south, east, west, something like that sort. So you basically moved from, let's say, 5 to 20 to now 40 to a large number of segments. How do you deal with this?
That is wherein MarTech tools like yours come into the picture and help us take informed decisions.
But is there a lot of then automation gets involved, or how would the choice of which news goes to which user get orchestrated? Because you have, let's say, tons of breaking news.
It's all automated, and with the generative AI coming into the picture, we are looking to automate more and more stuff. Although half of the triggers that any media publisher sends are editorials call that this particular news story is going to work well for this sort of cohort. But a lot of things happen on the fly, because you are constantly working, constantly breaking news, constantly writing new copies that need to be put out, constantly shooting videos. So that is where we need AI.
That's what I'd love to zoom into. You spoke about the human touch, the editorial side of things, getting to decide which cohort gets what. And you have a certain size of audience across multiple cohorts. And there could be various ways of slicing and dicing this base, right? So if your editorial team has to say that, okay, this particular piece of breaking news is relevant with this group, and there'll be 20, 30, 40, 50 such decisions to be made on an everyday basis, I would imagine. Because the breaking news universe is large and the audience is large and comprehensive. And if you're talking about the use of AI within this, what is the AI component really doing? Is it choosing news and mapping to segment and having a send?
There is categorization of stories.
Okay.
Then there is categorization within cities as well. What is something that we call hyperlocal. So what we typically do is that news site / category / city, and then you file stories. So you exactly know that which city is going to like what sort of content from what category. So if you just put AI into the picture, the AI would definitely be able to pick category, and probably it will be able to cohortization basis the previous responses that we have
Hmm.
gotten for that particular category's news into a certain city.
So in effect, where the segmentation variables were quite a few, and now you have content which also has these attributes attached to it, the marriage of these two and to do a good job in personalization is where you're expecting AI to play a role.
Yes.
So I think what and a parallel to this would probably be what content recommendations or product recommendations in the e-commerce world.
Yeah, might be.
People who saw
Close.
this also saw this. People who consumed this also consumed this kind of metrics. What would your current, let's say, scale of automation in this whole game is? If you were to send 100 odd notifications in a day, would you say that 50 to 60% are driven editorially or more, or what does that look like?
So around 60% are the ones which are automated. 30 to 40%. So typically editorial only works on the stories that are breaking news, something that new is coming in. Because within editorial also you have niche teams.
Sure.
One team would be working on Bollywood, one team would be working on crime, one team would be working on gadgets, one would be working on news. It's typically the news editorial team which is going to send out these notifications, because those notifications are relevant and time bound. The rest all notifications can be scheduled. So if you are doing some story in Bollywood, a certain celebrity is getting married, or some new phone is going to get launched today, that stories are filed probably 1 day prior to the exact date or 2 days prior, and then the notifications are scheduled by the AI.
Got it. So in terms of the kind of KPIs that these people are chasing, and there seems to be a diverse bunch of people who have access to execute this whole communication piece, right? What kind of KPIs are they chasing? Is this plain click-through or is there more to it?
First and foremost, KPI is page views.
Okay.
Then second KPI is page views per user, because a lot of effort and cost goes into acquiring customers.
Sure.
Be it on app, be it on mobile web, there is a certain cost attached to the same. And once you have somebody on your platform, you would want to milk them as much as possible. So LTV comes into the picture as well. The more page views a certain user is visiting, the more are the chances or the probability of him or her clicking on an ad and we getting some sort of revenue, or the more chances are for them to come across our direct campaign and buy something through our affiliates. So first KPI is page views, obviously. Second is users per page views, and third obviously is to retain them as much as possible.
And from the org design and handshake points, there's somebody who's driving app installs and there's somebody who's driving all of these communications, a set of people. The CAC in your language, would this be an app install, or is there another metric to defining what the user acquisition
app
is?
Install.
It's the cost of an app install. So the team that's chasing all of these paid campaigns to drive app installs and spending the money on performance marketing there, and from their KPI point of view, does it purely look at CAC and cost per install, or is there more to it?
You typically look at cost per install, and then they pass the bait into editorial, who's supposed to retain the user.
Sure.
Their job ends at bringing the user to the app install. They just bring somebody to the door, and now it's up to the editorial to retain them, to show them across the place.
Is there a feedback loop from the retention side of the equation to the acquisition side of the equation in terms of the quality of users of whatever nature? Because you can jolly well scale up probably a large number of users from poor quality sources, and there is a lot of fraud that also happens in the industry now. Is there something on your radar yet in some fashion?
We keep working with players, and we keep working with technology to obviously reduce number of bot installs we have. In past, any publisher would have come across these bot installs. So there are different softwares that we use, and then it's pretty evident that when you get an app installed, but then the app does not get opened for a certain amount of time, or there's just one open in a day, typical open rate is very low, and then you probably don't read anything. You just come across the home screen and then you log out, and then the app gets uninstalled after 10 days or 12 days. So you're able to figure that out pretty easily with the type of analytics that we have.
Something that the acquisition team is anyways mindful of. Yeah. But from a scale-up perspective, there's a fraud side of the equation, and there is just poor quality audience acquisition, because your penetration is huge already, right? So now if you were to expand beyond a certain level, you will start to get users whose internet usage itself is not that insane, which means their frequency of users, their patterns of usage might not be in sync with your monetization goals. How do you factor this that, I'm good with this CAC of, let's say, 20 rupees, because this audience is going to engage like this frequency is this much time, and you spoke about LTV, and I'm going to delve deeper into that. But for now, purely on the acquisition side, how do you make it more, let's say, sophisticated or intelligent to make sure you're able to get the quality of audience you want?
It's basically hit and triangle. There is no formula to it.
Yeah.
We just hope that people who are coming are going to engage with our content. India is improving in terms of literacy rate, but
Sure.
we do have content mediums which do not require literacy, or probably does not involve you trying to engage or concentrate, because our attention spans are also very shrinking. So stuff like web stories, which are probably present on every news publisher's site or app, and accounts for today at least 40% of their overall traffic, is a visual medium wherein there is very little text.
Sure.
Probably a couple of lines, and then you have 15 to 16 images.
Yeah.
That is where the engagement comes from. And after 4-5 images, you put an ad so that you get paid as well. And since you are clicking on the story, next, you tend to click the ads as well. Then you have photo galleries. Then you have reels as well. Each and every publisher has introduced reels. So the type of content consumption pattern is changing, and that is what leads to higher engagement.
So which would then mean that you get a whole bunch of people in and now find ways of tactically engaging them in some fashion or the other, so they stick around long enough. And that kind of now switches to the whole LTV side of the equation. And given that this is ad monetized overall, how does the equation work? What kind of numbers do you see as good enough or not good enough for?
A 3-month retention, which is probably in the range of 8 to 10%, is something that would be considered very good in media industry.
8 to 10% at the end of 3 months.
At the end of 3 months.
Okay, that's a very different benchmark compared to what we typically hear, because in the e-commerce world, most people will probably be hoping for about 30% at the end of month 1. 3 months is a very different story for a lot of them.
But in e-commerce, how many times will you be using
Of course,
app?
yeah.
Probably once a month or once a week. And our typical open rates in a day is anywhere between 70 to 80%. So whatever user base we have, 75 to 80% of them typically open our app every day. Most of this happens through notifications, because when as I said, that we get 10 chances at least in a day to engage an audience. After those 10 notifications, you would at least want to engage on 2 or 3. And each and every media publisher is very good at writing clickbaits as well. We practically invented the industry. So you can't resist our clickbait notifications.
Which is kind of what makes me then wonder about the whole automated personalized side of things versus the clickbaity side of things, because the copywriter can do a great job, but ultimately what would be clickbaity for you might not be the same for me. And that's where your automated personalized stuff bases all the cohortization and segmentation might come into the picture. So what happens typically which causes users to move on in some fashion?
It's very hard to predict. At times what happens is that they want to take a break from news itself.
Okay.
That is the prime reason that we come across that. There is too much news because you are stressed, or whatever happens in your personal life tends to affect the app consumption as well. At times, so most of our user base is in the range of 18 to 24.
Okay.
So whenever we typically see that there are college exams scheduled or school exams scheduled, our install rate goes out. And
some
then
fatigue is what you seem to be
indicating.
It's
all seasonal. Whenever elections are coming or a big event is coming, like IPL, Asia Cup, World Cup, you tend to see more and more organic installs and paid installs as well. But then it's all cyclical. So there is nothing that you can point out that why users are leaving.
Sure. So if you're doing this whole aggressive install play, and this gets, let's say the paid side of things will also have its own cycles during IPLs and elections and those kind of situations, and you will get a whole bunch of users from then who will have their run for a bit, and then they'll exit the situation, and they might also come back in the next cycle and so on. Because ultimately the time in India with mobile phones which are capable of handling apps like this, you're probably one of those people who might have hit the caps. How do you look at this situation?
So typically what happens is, what we see is that news is always a second screen nowadays. Nobody watches news typically on a linear platform or broadcast platform. People are consuming news only on mobile. So they typically, even if you are watching an IPL match, so with the IPL being free on Jio, and then Asia Cup and World Cup being free on Hotstar or whatever platform they are going to be on, you would constantly want to be updated on stats as well. So while you are consuming news, while you are consuming this on your TV, you would want to stay updated on news, and then you would want to stay updated on what are the stats that are happening in match. And then with this FOMO thing coming in, if you're not able to see first 5 overs or some event of a particular match, or if you missed something, you'll probably want to go and search about it. So the easiest way to do that is that.
So that's what makes me wonder now, given that the number of overall users that you could have in the market essentially overall is finite, and you kind of will hit the cap in some fashion. Or do you see there's enough headroom because India is such a large market, there's geographies, there's languages, and there's enough headroom to grow? Because if you keep losing 90% of the users in 3 months, at some point this will cap out. How does it work for you?
So the ecosystem is ever expanding.
Mm.
We don't. I disagree with the part that it's a finite number. So
Okay.
every month we get a ComScore report or whatever study Google said the smartphone penetration is already is always increasing in India. So I don't see a
I thought
saturation
I would
coming
imagine
in.
it like some number it will start to like taper off, right?
That number is still not in sight.
It's in early days.
At least to us, with 5G coming into picture, internet becoming more and more cheaper, we actually have seen a growth in terms of the ecosystem as well for the entire news and publishing segment.
So what's very interesting for me is we typically look at 90% churn in 3 months equations as a very, very leaky bucket, and that could be unviable. But you're saying that this is viable for you and it's considered actually a good situation in the media industry. Because eventually, let's say a couple of 100 million or maybe 500 million users overall ecosystem, and you spoke about the age bracket as well. And now this ecosystem will churn through your whole plain matter of, let's say, a year. At the end of the year, people might either come back to install the application and uninstall again in the next season. We're just trying to understand that when you talk about LTV as a subject, is this to do with the single, let's say, duration of when I install the application and uninstall the application, and that's the journey? Or is there more to it between multiple sessions of install as well?
So probably it's got to do multiple sessions of install as well, because we keep reaching out on each and every medium that is out there. So if you might have installed our app, but you might still be following us on Instagram, or you might be following us on Facebook, or you are following our Twitter handle, you might be following one of the anchors, or you might be following something totally unrelated to us, but you might see our story being populated in your social feed. You might get a clip of any of our video or our article on your WhatsApp or Telegram. So we keep reaching out to the masses, and eventually we know that if once you have installed our app, you'll probably come back within a couple of months, 3 months.
So the cycle will keep going up, going down, going up, going down. The same audience eventually keeps coming, right?
Yeah, but 18 to 24 bracket is there, but when stuff comes, it gets compensated by other age bracket as well. So month on month for every news media publisher, there is only growth.
So in effect, what we're saying is there is going to be always this volatility of people coming in and exiting, and a good number at the end of 3 months. If you have 8% of the people left, then that's a good situation. But those remaining 90% people who've come in and left will also eventually come back sooner or later. So in a steady state, it's essentially the share of
So it does not concern us typically that people leave our platform, although we would typically want to have better retention rate across the industry. But then we know that whenever there is a breaking news story, which keeps on happening at least once a week, fortunately, unfortunately, so we'll always get a chance to get our users back. And then overall ecosystem keeps on expanding. So for every media publisher, there is they have the numbers that have been in the past as well have grown month on month, and that is going to be the trend in the coming year as well.
So in effect,
until we hit that saturation point that you were talking about,
which is saying it's still early days, there's enough headroom available.
Not there for 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years more to go. So the overall universe will keep expanding. People will keep juggling between applications, but then there is enough room for everyone to play. And does the typical user have multiple apps of this nature, or is there a is there a way to know that?
I'm yet to come across a person who just has one news app. So typically people have 3 to 4 news apps.
Yeah. And that's a pattern that it works for everyone but is that also then a battle of whose notification reaches first? When you have 4 apps?
Yes.
Which would then put a lot of pressure on your server infrastructure, because that's a complicated engineering problem to solve, to make sure you're delivering to the billion users or whatever, 500 million users in a matter of seconds, because reaching there first automatically means greater share of interventions.
Exactly. Yep. The faster you reach, the more are the chances that the news gets consumed on your platform. And when somebody is coming to read a breaking news story, we have very efficient CRE mechanisms, content recommendation engine mechanisms that would cater to your interest. And then
so you're saying when somebody comes to the platform is where content recommendation starts to play. So the page view expansion happens.
Average page views or screen views per user for any big media publisher would at least be 6.
Once he comes in, you'll make him do at least 6 stories.
So that's an average.
Yeah. So which means obviously there'll be people. Do you normally see this in your play? is this a norm that, okay, you'll be above average across the board, or you will have properties which are above, below, whatever?
You have every major media publisher has their own USP. Some of the newer ones of the crop are more focused on doing niche stories. So probably during COVID, everybody of us read a lot of recipes on New York Times because they had a very good cooking category that started picking up. Washington Post does a lot of real estate related posts wherein they show mansions and everything, which somebody typically sitting in Noida would also like to read. So different news publishers are known for different things, and probably the ecosystem is too large for everybody to coexist. So we are not concerned about what others are doing or what we are doing. So typically, it's all going to average out.
You mentioned your content recommendation engine as an important part of your on-page engagement. Does this also interplay with the communication side of things at all?
No.
You would not want to send me something which is more curated to what I'm doing in some sense? Is this something which is on a to-do?
So we have probably tried that, and that hasn't worked well for us. We probably feel that it's one of those industries wherein you like getting surprised. You would want to read stuff that you don't intend to read, or that is something which is out of the curve. That is what keeps you hooked. Rather than if I know that you're a cricket fan, if I keep catering cricket news to you, then it's probably at one point in time you will hit a saturation level and you will stop coming back. But what if I use that cricket story to get you on my platform and then show you two stories related to Bollywood, one story related to MMA, and then one completely unrelated clickbait listicle, you are more probable to stay on my platform.
Which is a very interesting and slightly counterintuitive point overall, because normally you would imagine a certain degree of pattern and preference. It's kind of how linear AI would work. But what you're talking about now seems to be more heuristic driven, or is this still something an AI engine is able to surface?
It's probably AI which has come into the picture. So everybody is trying to simulate something that people are consuming on a mass scale, which is Instagram these days. So news is also becoming Instagramish, be it inculcating web stories, be it inculcating their UI UX. So you don't realize the difference that you're not on an Instagram and you are on a news app, and then catering stories in that particular format only. So what we typically do is that even on Instagram, when you're scrolling your feed, 9 out of 10 times, if you have not followed a lot of pages, that is your feed. But when you are browsing reels on Instagram, you don't know what you're going to see next. Similarly with news as well.
So the uncertainty / the surprise element ends up being a big driver of engagement, which is not what you would think normally, but then AI is surfacing this as an outcome.
So people are so used to nudges these days that they don't know what they want to read. So they typically leave it to you. Same thing with Spotify as well. You don't know what you want to listen. Same thing with Netflix. They also have a surprise me. So half of the time, people don't want to do decision making for themselves. They delegate it.
So passive
delegation. Yeah.
Delegation is one of the ways things are moving. In terms of the role channels play in your game, and you have multiple, I would imagine users have email addresses, web push could be a channel. I don't know if SMS, WhatsApp make a lot of sense in your world because they tend to be expensive. How do you look at that mix?
So a typical media mix is tilted 60% towards social media and 40% towards searches that come in from Google.
Okay.
Out of that 60%, 50% would be Facebook. A lot of people above 40-45 years consume content from Facebook. So
this is all organic you're still talking about?
Yes, this is all organic. Rest 40 would be from Insta, and then 20% would be from WhatsApp.
What does WhatsApp mean here?
All of us have bots wherein we send push notifications to our users as well, wherein they
on
stay
WhatsApp?
Updated on WhatsApp.
Isn't that really expensive though?
It's expensive, but then it keeps the user hooked. And the only things that we send on WhatsApp or any publisher sends on WhatsApp is something that has the potential to go viral. Because we are not making any money as such from WhatsApp.
Sure.
Typically. But then the probability to go viral with one of our videos is something that keeps us spending on WhatsApp or Telegram.
So this would be typically a branded asset which would have the potential to get circulated on WhatsApp organically.
Suppose anybody has done, any media publishing house has a big breaking news or a big interview that they have done with a cabinet minister or a big sports personality or a Bollywood personality. How do you promote that? So you use WhatsApp as that, and then you'll probably put out a teaser which will hook your end audience to it, and then you get them on your platform.
This would typically be links which will bring traffic back, and that's what's getting circulated.
Yes.
On one side, you spoke about social media, which is normally the organic feed on Facebook.
Yes, organic.
But given the way Facebook operates, your reach over there will ultimately get capped. Or how does it look for you?
We keep doing a lot of Facebook Live with whatever celebrities or personalities that keep visiting us in our studio. So whenever you do a live, your organic reach increases because
substantially.
Facebook is also into FBTV and IGTV. So they push you organically when you are doing videos and a lot of lives. So this is 100% organic media mix. But if we talk about paid media mix, probably our spends are more tilted towards Google, wherein we spend 75%, or probably any media publisher would have the same paid media mix. 75% would be something that they would be spending on app stores, be it Google Play Store or iOS App Store, and rest 25% would be on social media.
So when you say app store, this is just about making sure that when somebody is searching for a set of words, your app ends up being at the top of the game. And that's where you spoke about the cost per install being the kya wala kahani. Now on the other side, where you have people who have installed the application, perhaps still have the application, but the uninstall rate is a certain pace. So you still have maybe access to web push notifications, maybe access to emails, maybe access to WhatsApp in some cases, because even if they've uninstalled the app, you still have the numbers and that could flow in. What's the ratio between known and unknown users, and how does the media play on this side look like?
So typically, media as an industry does not have a lot of first-party data, but people are starting to invest into that and trying to build their own user bases, customer bases, list of email addresses and phone numbers. Typically, people don't have the time to log into a certain news platform, and then consume news, because most of it is on the fly, and then you're breaking something. You wouldn't want to spend money, spend time getting the OTP, putting in the OTP and signing. So, but yeah, every media player is now started to invest into single sign-ons, SSOs, and we are getting there. But if you talk about the typical mix, probably the ratio of known and unknown would be, for any publisher, around 95% of the users on our platform are unknown.
Okay, that's a huge chunk.
5% of them, because the numbers that any typical publisher gets is typically in tens of millions. So even if you are able to get 5%, probably in absolute terms, you would be 2x or 3x of any D2C player or e-commerce player.
But on one side, you have let's say social platforms like Facebook and Instagram, and ultimately they're also driving content consumption, and in between they have a certain level of monetization ability sorted. It has to do with a certain amount of data that they've captured about the user, which empowers the advertisers to get better ROI when they advertise with us. Is this a lens that you look at in your content play as well, that now the guy's spending this much time? If I'm able to do a better job on segmentation in some sense, then my monetization ability might look very different. Is that a lens that you currently look at?
So we do it in some form. If we get quality audience on a certain segment, then probably it's very easy for us to go and pitch to a particular advertiser. For example, if we have a very good gadgets audience on our side, we can typically reach out to all the mobile players and say that we have these many people from tier 1 cities, and our categorization is that they are from SEC A or SEC B. And you can typically do a direct deal with us rather than routing it through Google or Facebook, and will give you better rates. So the industry is trying to get there, wherein you are leveraging your first party data to earn more revenue.
Which then would mean that you would want to improve that 5% number to maybe a higher ratio.
That is the plan. With the generative AI and things like Bard and ChatGPT coming in, the entire industry is shifting to conversational search. So typically, Google has also seen a drop in the searches after ChatGPT went live.
Yeah.
So the future that every media publisher is seeing is that people will even searches are going to end. So the only way to retain audiences is to create original content. For example, 10 years back, if you wanted to know cricket scores, you'll typically type live cricket scores, and then you will get X publisher, Y publisher, Z publisher, covering those, and then you go to their site and do that. Now, if you type something, you will directly get a Google card telling the exact cricket score. Same with election results.
Sure.
If you would want to see election results, typically 5 years back, you would go into a particular site. You'll have to go on a news platform and check the same. Google throws it up directly. Same thing with movie reviews. So typically, as an industry, media needs to reinvent itself, and the way forward is only original content.
So how does generative AI and original content interplay solve for the user's engagement? Because are you saying the user will look on ChatGPT and the answers that will come would probably be sourced from your media, and that's where you'll have a certain share?
So I'll just give you an example. Being a wildlife enthusiast, typically I keep tracking what's happening in that particular domain. So if I come across a story that a certain tiger has turned man-eater in Sundarbans, so if with generative AI coming in, or AI things like Bard coming in, the only result that I'll get is that this particular tiger has turned man-eater in Sundarban, and it has consumed 11 or 12 victims. So that's going to be the end. That is the information that a conversational search engine is going to throw up. Things like ChatGPT, because your prompt is very limited. But when you start creating original content, you'll come across stuff like, why does a tiger turn man-eater in the first place? How many tigers does Sundarban have? And then you'll have the entire journey of the tiger turning into a man-eater. When was the first victim there? Second victim there? Interviews. So this can be a typical 45 minutes a documentary. So things which are human interest stories or original stories are something that are the way forward for media industry. Going one step forward rather than dealing with anything or everything on a superficial level. Because information exchange can happen through these conversational search or AI-based platforms. But when you want to deep dive, again, you'll have to come to a typical news platform.
Which then makes me wonder, in terms of the depth of content you're talking about creating, what does it mean from the editorial and content creation side of things? Because the volume of original content you're talking about, if you're going to deal with nuanced situations like wildlife enthusiasts who care about man-eaters, there are millions of such scenarios. How does that scenario look like?
So you'll be surprised that we do get a lot of videos through a network of stringers or local reporters who cover these stories, and then they typically sell it to every media publishing house. But what's happening right now is that people are not ready to consume that type of content, and they typically want only superficial news. That's how players like InShorts have made a complete business out of it. But with conversational AIs and things like Bard coming in, all this would be taken care typically by Bard, which is again open to beta platforms, and that is how it typically works. It's going to answer a query in 2 or 3 sentences. It's going to give you the source, and then it's going to give you the typically like Wikipedia. Nobody goes down and read those 50 citations which has all the links. That is where the news industry is heading as well. But when you realize that this is all taken care of and people want to deep dive into something, is when you start stitching those local reporter videos into a meaningful 40-minute or 30-minute documentary.
And which would suddenly change this whole battle for CPMs and stuff, right? Because then the monetization model also has to look very different. You can't bank on high volume of traffic.
That has actually all started happening because the CPM rates are at an all-time low for any media publisher. So typically the way forward is doing direct deals with advertisers, creating a lot of branded content, and that is the way forward.
So what kind of time window do you imagine this to start getting, like, I don't know, what share of your revenue will start getting affected, which is...
Typically, it's going to start post a couple of years. Bard is yet to go live. Once Bard goes live, because Google can't go live the same way ChatGPT does. They cannot afford any errors, being the company that they are. So if they release it in end of this year, typical adoption, there would be very little early adopters, and then the typical adoption cycle kicks in. So at least 2 to 3 years, everybody has time to prepare and brace for what's coming.
This is almost seeming like an existential question for the media industry, right? Because you will have people that might not be able to adapt to the new situation. So what would be your top 3 pointers on how to prepare for this?
First would be to know the pulse of your audience. Why is certain audience coming onto your platform? Second is recognize what type of content they consume and in what format. And third is just focus on what works for you, rather than trying to cover each and every genre.
You're making it sound much simpler than it originally seemed to me. But on that note, thank you so much for this conversation, Akshansh.
Thanks.
This was extremely insightful for me. A bunch of things that are counterintuitive, normally the way I thought about commerce and recommendations. But great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So the part that I enjoy the most about doing these conversations is a very diverse set of people that we bring together, the very diverse set of insights that come from them. Now, media industry has its own set of questions and answers. It's an existential question how they evolve given how AI is changing how consumers consume content, right? Which is very interesting compared to what it was 5 years ago where Google would send you traffic. Now Google has its own content cards which does not send you traffic anymore. The part that is extremely interesting from a leaf out of Instagram and Facebook essentially is the element of surprise in the content recommendation. People like to find stuff that they did not really predict, right? And that keeps the user engaged on their platform much better than what it would be if it was all predictable and boring. The third part, which is the media industry nuance specifically, given that the scale of hundreds of millions of users is kind of typical to either a messaging platform or a media platform. Users tend to have multiple lifetimes. They will install the application, engage with it for a certain period, want to stay updated with even 10 notifications in a day, but eventually uninstall and then probably come back after some time in the next season. So this is a very unique to media kind of situation because other industries tend to have a much sharper fall through. So I hope you found this content useful. Thanks for tuning in.